So welcome everyone to, this is our Scrub third Twilight highlight meeting, which is, and Scrub is a beautiful acronym that stands for Sanitation and Cleaning Resources for Your Business. Yeah, this has been a really exciting project to be involved in as far as I'm concerned. With the National Farmers Union, Extension, Michigan State, Cornell, and we're all getting together, and I'll just give a quick introduction to this in a minute. But tonight we're really focusing on washback floors and floor repair, but plenty of other questions. So hopefully if you're here, you have some either issues or things about your floors that you're thinking to either improve or do something with, and you are in the right classroom. And let me admit, Chris Callahan, who's actually presenting, he must have dropped off. So I'm going to stop the share, and we will, let's just go around and do quick introductions. So I'm glad you got back on, Chris. We probably will have some people.
Something I said.
Well, we just want our speakers to be here, actually. And we have some actually good new information, stuff that Chris is going to go over, some good resources that we put together, and Chris is taking the lead on, which has been awesome. I've been involved in. And some of the team is here, the Scrub team, and some great farmers are here, and more will trickle in. So we'll just go around, and if you can turn on your video just for the introductions, and our team will keep it real short, but if you're here with an actual wash pack floor issue or thing, definitely why don't you say where you're coming from, your farm, and why you're here, your issue, or bottleneck or whatever you're hoping to resolve. That would be great. So let's go around the screen, and I will start with Bob, who I see on my upper left. Bob.
Hello, Bob, Vermont Cranberry Company, dealing with a couple issues. One, I have a 10-year-old existing actually juice room that's been used for cranberry juice, which is basically pouring muriatic acid on your concrete whenever you use it. So it's down to aggregate. I need to repair that. And then I'm also pouring a brand new floor for a wash pack facility next Tuesday. So I figured see where we're going.
You're perfect timing, and a good form too, where we've done some repairs and had some issues with acid floors that have degraded a bit. Howie, you're next.
Okay. High Meadows Farm, and I'm just a lurker.
And where, say where you're coming from too. I may have missed that with Bob, but
like where am I coming from in terms of interest? We laid a concrete floor about 12 years ago, and they did a crappy job on the finish. And there's still footprints from the contractor. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I do? Could I just paint it like with epoxy paint, or should it be re-skimmed, or what could work? Because cleaning it it doesn't really happen like a clean floor should be. And I don't want it shiny smooth that people are going to slip. We already had like an accident last year with an employee who slipped on a tiny piece of squash that fell on the floor, and she stretched out, and she was wearing those stupid Crocs, which outlawed from the farm. They're really dangerous shoes. But it laid her up for like 8 weeks. So anyway, that's why I'm here. I want to know concrete.
Yep. And you want to avoid Crocs.
Crocs, right? How do we outlaw Crocs?
Yep. Well, you're in the right classroom.
I've got Mike envy of Andy. How does he get a mic? I don't have a mic like that. Like, what is he in a professional studio? The budget allows for that?
Okay, all right, Howie, we'll let him defend himself real quick here. Andy?
Good evening, Andy Chamberlain from BDM Extension. I work with Ag Engineering and the Produce Safety Team. I also have a podcast, the Ag Engineering Podcast. So Howard, I think I need to come down and visit you and actually get you behind one of these mics as well, so you can feel like a rock star as well. I also do a lot of the outreach sort of stuff, photos, videos, work on the blog of many resources that we're going to highlight tonight. So I'm a little bit of the face behind the website. So welcome and thanks all for joining.
Chris gets your hand down tech stuff, right? Isn't Chris wearing one of your old headsets?
Andy would never touch this thing. Are you kidding me? This is like Radio Shack level. He's way above that mark.
Yeah. All right, that may be close to one of the last comments about the tech gear tonight. And we're over to Mark on my list.
Yeah, Mark from Jericho Settlers Farm. We built a couple of an add-on a small pack house 2011, which we quickly outgrew, and then nearby built a bigger one. And it's probably the issues that we're having with that really is a certain section we were too cheap to throw in a bunch of sand before we did the concrete, and we're getting some upheaval in some areas. So Chris and Andy's recent topic on repairing concrete floors is one we need to really look at and probably do some repairs at some point. But that's kind of really the biggest thing for us is we're just seeing some cracks develop in a portion of the washout.
That's great. And I really want to thank Mark for joining us tonight. We asked him because you guys have had a fair bit of experience with floors and pouring floors and doing a lot of other stuff too, but just talking a little bit about your journey there, your floor journey. All right, Jeff Anthony is next farmer on my list. As far as I know, are you here, Jeff?
Hi, this is Jeff Anthony. Our farm is Pinewood Springs Farm in Rockdale County, Georgia. We're just starting designing our building, and so right now we just have gravel. So I just want to see what the next steps would be.
Great time to do it. Let's see, some of our team is here. We got Phil Toko. Unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Phil Toko. I'm with Michigan State University Extension. I am the extension educator doing on-farm food safety for the entire state, based in Jackson County, which is the south central part of the state. There's absolutely no fruits and vegetables here. I have to drive 2 hours to get to any fruits and vegetables of any appreciable. I mean, other than, anyway, but yeah.
All right. And Ava, if you will introduce yourself, that'd be great. She's a member of our team here.
Sure thing. In between bites of my dinner. Good evening, everybody. Ava DeBovis. I am the Food Safety Project Manager here at the National Farmers Union Foundation, working really closely overseeing the local food safety collaborative. So happy to see some familiar faces here today and happy to be joining my teammates as they present. Thanks. And I'm located in Maryland.
All right, moving to New York with Robert Haddad.
Hello, I'm Robert Haddad. I'm with the Cornell Vegetable Program. I'm one of the regional vegetable specialists out here in Western New York. So our team covers all aspects of vegetable production, but my big the big hat that I wear is farm food safety. So I have statewide responsibilities for educational programming and it's a little bit of research and just participating in projects like these, which are just so important for growers. And yeah, I've had a lot of calls over the late winter, early spring about floors. So this is going to be really important information I think we'll have tonight. So looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. And Paula and Clay from Hawaii. You're not from Hawaii.
That would be nice. So I'm Clay. My wife Paul and I run Foster Brady Farm. We are in Walton County, Georgia. So I think we're pretty close to Jeff, who's a little to the west of us. We have a wash pack currently that has a concrete floor, but we have outgrown the barn that it's located in. So we're in the process of planning to build a new one to fit our growing needs. We also retrofitted the current barn we're in. So we're trying to build something that's more specific to what we're doing. So trying to learn some things here.
Great. And Chris, why don't we head to you, and then I'll kick things off.
Hey, everybody. Chris Callahan with UVM Extension, Agricultural Engineering. I manage the Ag Engineering program here. My internet is going to be challenging tonight, so I hope you can hear me, and I may have to kill my video. So just give me a heads up if that's the case. The work we do, we tend to focus on things that I always think civilization has figured out about 2,500 years ago, but it turns out we haven't. So floors is a good example where, it seems like a pretty simple, mundane topic, but there's actually a fair bit of nuance to it. And our hope with tonight's conversation is to learn from folks who have been through some recent floor projects and to make sure everybody's aware of some resources that at the very least should help you have a conversation with a concrete contractor at the very least, because there are some specific things about produce wash pack areas and floors and concrete that they are not always aware of. So it's great to have you all here and great to be with you. Thanks.
I said thank you very much, Chris, for telling me that I'm muted, and very much looking forward to this evening. And hold on, my advancer just stopped working. What is that all about? Yeah, thanks. I'm really looking forward to this. And we are, again, this is an unusual introduction. I'll get right into why unusual workshop, in that we sort of work backwards from some problems and get really focused. And we've gotten through these introductions. I guess I didn't introduce myself, and I will real quick. I am going to facilitate this workshop, and I'm part of the Scrub team. I help facilitate and manage the community accreditation for produce safety here in Vermont through the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association. And I have a keen interest in just this, making farms a same place to work, smooth, efficient production, things working well, people, enjoying their work and finding meaning in it, and finding markets and that kind of thing. So I come at it produce safety from that end and from the multiple benefits end. And we've come together. I love working in a team. So this has been a great experience for me to help pull this together. I'm not going to talk that much once I shut up here in a few minutes. Okay, so Chris will give a little presentation on some of the stuff he has come up with lately, and we'll have focus panel presentations from Mark at Jericho Settlers, and Joseph Dutton couldn't make it tonight because he had to swing up to Burlington and isn't able to attend, but I can give an intro, and actually Chris was there working, so that'll work just fine. We'll have a good chance to jump into your projects and think about what you're hoping to do and have some discussion. And then we're going to talk about follow-up logistics. A little bit about Scrub, where we're coming from. This is actually a FSOP, Food Safety Outreach Project from the USDA. The money comes from there, 3-year project. Multi-state is involved, and basically we're developing these hybrid resources, a big thing, and workshops, and then those are kind of put together with one-on-one technical support. So what we're trying to do is reach 375 growers one-on-one to help them get projects done. So we're working backwards, and that's really the thing. Hopefully you've come here with an actual issue or a problem in mind, and we'll follow up with you around that with the plan, some plan to make some improvement over the next few months or next year, or maybe it's just completing a plan for next year, and we can work with you to support that and follow up in time. So think of this as the start, the kickoff of something. And so just again, the one-on-one is key, and focusing on bottlenecks or something that is really increase risk and that increases your risk and decreases your efficiency. What are the problems you're having? When does the shit hit the fan? When are things like not working well, or what isn't working well? And you know more than anyone, and basically plan and implement a solution. And that's really what we're after here, and thinking about smooth and clean production flow. So food safety and cleaning definitely fits into this, but it isn't the center stage spotlight. It's going to be part of running a good farm. It's part of the plan. And in this case, we're focused on floors and issues you might be having with floors that hold up cleaning. They hold up, you can tell things are grimy, they're not draining well, or it's not working well, or you want to be able to move stuff more quickly or efficiently. There's some kind of repair that needs to be done, that kind of stuff. So let's just take a minute here, and you can exercise your drop box, your chat box technical skills. I know people have put some stuff in, but if there's anything else, what would you like specifically to work on or get out of tonight, or work on for a repair or something coming up? And we've heard a few of those, but there may be more specific things you could drop in the chat box. We'll just take a minute to pause there, and then I'll turn it over to Chris. And Chris says to everyone, what are your floor gripes? What projects are you planning? And Jeff is saying drains, ceiling, concrete. Where does gray water flow to? Great. Boy, you just hit like some of our top three, I'd say there. What type of paint or material would be appropriate to coat concrete crack repair? Well, Chris, looks like we're hitting the nail on the head here for what you're going to be addressing. Yep. Yeah, but anyone, feel free to pipe up. We don't have too many people here, and that's just great. But plenty of people will be watching this afterwards.
Well, I've been through it, but I hear some people are planning to lay concrete floors. And what I didn't know, you think you've hired somebody who, yeah, I could do concrete, yeah, I could put drainage in, but how do you ensure that you're getting the proper drainage built in, like during the crucial part of pouring the concrete? I'm an amateur. I've never laid concrete before. Nobody worked here has done it. So you sort of rely on this person that you're hiring, that they know what they're doing, and you get to live with the results for a long time. And 2 out of the 3 drains actually all the drains that were put in don't really do a good job in my barn. So we wind up using brooms or squeegees to kind of push the water down into the drains. And that really isn't acceptable for what I envisioned. So besides the finishing of the concrete, I would say that would be something for somebody putting down concrete floors to really pay attention to, and maybe make sure you hire somebody who could show you a resume of, a dozen floors they've done with drains, because you can't do this and learn on the fly. I don't think. It'd be a mistake.
Thanks, Howie. I think that's a great comment. And maybe Chris, you have something to add, but just asking the right questions and specific questions of contractors. Because if you ask a general question, you're going to say, yeah, I've done drains, yeah, like whatever. But might be different if you really get into the details. Yep.
Howard, you hit on a couple of really key points in my opinion. One is drains only work if the floor is part of the drain. And so the drains only work if the floor is pitched toward the drain. And that's something when you think about most slabs that are poured in residential and even commercial construction, they don't do that. They intentionally don't do that. So this is something we're trying to have them do that they're not always oriented to. And then the other thing that I think you highlighted, which is completely non-technical, but probably the most important thing, is get references and go look at jobs that they've done, and look at related jobs that they've done to make sure that what they ended up with is going to work for you. But I'll get into some more of the resources that help identify the questions to be asking and the specific things to be looking for, such as floor pitch and where drains should be, and things like that here in just a minute. But I really appreciate you highlighting those challenges.
Right. So just tell me when to switch.
Yep. Next slide. Let's jump in. So, we take them for granted, right? They are under our feet all day long when we're in the pack shed or other places where we have them. But floors really are the foundation of a lot of our work, and it's one of the few things probably that we use every single day. And if we stop and think about all the things that floors support us in doing, and think of all the things that floors actually require, what are the things that we're really grateful for that floors allow us to do? And so there are some hints in these pictures, and people have already identified some of them, but just drop some chat box as I'm going on here in the next couple slides. What is it that makes floors work for you, and what is it that makes floors work? So next slide, please. And I will say, just real quick, in the chat box, I'm going to drop links into the chat box of resources that Andy and I generally, and sometimes Hans as well, have developed. And first one is really an overview of concrete floors. And in that, it highlights some of the key characteristics of the work that's needed to make a floor function well for you, including, Howard, pitching the floor, and planning for that pitch and planning for where the water's going to go. It also covers some things like different kinds of concrete and different kinds of finishes. Somebody mentioned earlier, about slip hazards and trip hazards. And so choosing a finish that's relatively smooth to make it cleanable, but not so smooth that it's slippery, is really important. And that resource will help. So some of the benefits of a good floor is it can, allow for smooth movement of people for people being able to move around comfortably, as opposed to being in maybe gravel, muddy, wet, poorly drained area. Bins, we think about how many times bins land on the floor, and we should really be working to keep them up off the floor, maybe even on a pallet, to make sure there's space between bins and the floor. But floors allow us to do some really creative and efficient things with how we handle our bins. And water, I think Clay, brought up the question, or maybe it was Jeff, about what we're going to do with gray water. And that's a really key consideration. Floors can also make the cleaning job a lot easier. It can help us get the draining right, particularly if we plan ahead for it and we have a good contractor on the team. They also just provide a great deal of comfort when done well. And that's really important when you're putting hours and days and months in the pack shed. So some of the challenges is cost. And I totally get that. There are budget limitations always. Concrete is not the cheapest thing in the world. It's also sometimes a moving target in terms of cost. It varies pretty significantly. So cost is a key challenge. Some of the other challenges are doing it well as part of a renovation project can be really challenging, because you're sort of stuck with what you have, and you have to work around things like posts and maybe substandard footings, for example, or perimeter footings that you sometimes rather re-pour. Some other challenges, concrete floors need repair and maintenance, and we just finished up a nice set of resources that dig into what can be done there. Howard's situation, where he's got sort of an uneven surface, is a challenging one to repair well, and it's one I really want to dig into with you, Howard, and figure out, because it's a very common challenge. I have yet to find a really good answer for it. Okay, they can be challenging to clean, and they can also be challenging to drain well. So we're seeing that cleaning and draining show up in both columns. Go figure. It's not a crystal clear answer. So next slide, please.
Hey, Chris, before I switch,
Yep.
Jeff asked a question in the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, but about pouring slab, a partial slab in the walk-in is walk-in. And just anything specific you want to add on walk-in slabs right now, or maybe get into it a little later.
It's a lot of the same considerations for a walk-in cooler versus a slab in the wash pack, namely what's the finish, and thinking about how you do end up with drip from bins and produce, and also condensation. So that floor at times is going to be wet. Have you prepared for it to be wet? Will it drain to a central drain where that water can find its way out of the building? Does that drain have a rodent guard, for example, on the end of it to prevent rodents from getting into your cooler? Other than that, some of the common questions are about insulation, both under the slab and also as a thermal break. And at this point in time, I don't see any need for a thermal break in walk-in cooler floors between the walk-in cooler and other spaces. If you have a freezer, different story. But certainly insulating under the slab is helpful for retaining what you've cooled down. Those are the thoughts that come to mind. So I put in, just before we jump into Mark's presentation, I just want to drop in one other resource right now, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the floors overview, and it's a resource about drains. In this resource, we talk about two main kinds of drains: a spot drain, which is just that, it's a drain in one spot. But we also talk about trench drains, and I have a feeling Mark is going to talk a little bit about the trench drain that they poured into their wash pack. Since Mark did that, and actually as a result of Mark doing that, we were able to develop a set of plans for doing that well, and that they're included at the end of that drains resource. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark. And Hans, you're going to do the intro? You're muted.
Muted, yeah. Well, I will just say real quick that Jericho Settlers has been an amazing farm, a leader in Vermont, on a lot of different avenues of record keeping and just dialing things in, employee management, good systems. So I do just want to let Mark, probably since he's here, just real quick what your farm does, and then we'll just hop into the your old pack shed and a couple key points.
Well, that's all the great things you said there, Hans. Really attributable to my wife, not so much me. But yeah, when we started, we did everything: poultry, beef, lamb, pork, vegetables, and we've got rid of all the animals, and now we're just doing only veggies. We've got about 19 separate hoop houses, close to 2 acres under cover, in-ground heat. So we do a lot of early cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers in those houses, and then flip them over kind of as we speak. We're starting to flip those over for winter production, direct seeding winter greens, transplanting kale, chard, that sort of thing. Since we run our year-round CSA, we keep those all going. So obviously all that, so about 30 acres out in the field in the summertime. And so we obviously have a place to wash and pack all of that. And we started with an old barn similar to what Howie has. And that had busted up concrete, and we took that out and put in some gravel and lived with that for a while. And then eventually we had that floor poured in there and some smaller drains put in. So kind of what you're looking at there in that photo was an add-on to the outside of that old dairy barn. And that was about a 20 wide by, I think, 80 long. And no, not even quite that much, 20 by 45, I think. Half of that, it was an open space, which was our wash pack space when we were still small, so maybe 20 by 20, which is what you're looking at in that photo. And then behind that is another 20 by 20 cooler, walk-in cooler. That's about maybe 9 feet high or so. Yeah, through that door. So that worked out pretty well as an interim measure because we outgrew the barn. No issues. Those floors are pitched. That center drain. It's got like a plastic drain hole that kind of screws into that drain opening, concrete opening, and that fills up with a lot of debris. So you have to really pop that out of there and clean that really well. We don't really do a lot of wash in that location now. We used to, but we outgrew that facility. We put it in about 10 years ago. We outgrew it I think within a year. We were just at that stage in our farm where things we were really just like full speed ahead and really grew quite rapidly. So within a year or two, we actually then built our current larger facility, which is really where all the wash and pack occurs. And that's 45 wide by 85, I think, long. I wish it were twice that size, but it's not. So we have to live with what we have. But one of the things that we were kind of cheap in trying to get this thing done, and we didn't put a lot of sand or really any sand in a certain section of the floor. And what you see there in that photo is some cracks that had been developing. So a lot of frost heave making its way into that concrete in the wintertime, and not really noticeable buckling of it really that you can see, but obviously it's moving. And we're going to have some repairs we're going to need to do there. Not so bad to the point where you can't run a pallet jack over it, but it will be getting to that point if we don't address it soon. Drainage, we pitched part of kind of the center of the wash pack area. We pitched to a center wide drain, much wider drain than we did in the previous wash house.
You talking about this one here? Or
right next to the barrel, right to the right of that barrel washer there. And so it's got some grading that's, I don't even know what the dimension, probably, I don't know, 14 or 16 inches across, maybe even more than that. So it's easily, you can lift those sections out and get a shovel in there and shovel out any debris that settles. And then there's a standpipe at the very end that then goes to, I don't know, I want to say it's 4 or 6 inch pipe. There you can see the green guy there, probably 4 inch. That goes underground and then actually goes all the way to a ditch by the side of the road. And that's where the bulk of the wash house water goes. And the town hasn't called us on it yet, but that's where it all goes.
And Mark, how high is that pipe above the bottom?
I don't know. It was, I've cut it down, actually. It was a little bit high, and I think I've cut it down. So I want to say it's probably 6 inches from the bottom of that trench. And looking at that picture, I think the last time it looked that good is when Andy came by to take photos, and he actually cleaned that thing lickety split and did an excellent job. I'm trying to get him back to do more of that. He might make some good money on the side cleaning.
Yeah, I don't know about lickety split. I was there quite a while, but it does look quite nice.
But yeah, I don't think it's looked that good since Andy was there. But that's a good photo. We probably should post that photo and say this is what we want it to look like at least. But that worked out really well, actually. I've replaced a couple of those gratings over it. There's like 3 or 4 sections that kind of fit in there, and I've had to replace one section because I drove over it with a heavy forklift and crumpled it pretty well. But easy enough to get and get fabricated at a metal shop.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about why you have that standpipe in the end of that drain? What happens there?
So the standpipe, so the water rises. So any of the water that falls to the floor, especially when we're running the barrel washer, there's a lot of water. We're doing roots all winter long. It's it's basically filling up that concrete trench, and the water rises up, and the water goes into that standpipe, and the sediment settles below it, and that allows us to actually periodically, probably at least once a week, if not more, shovel out that sediment that captures in that trough, and we add it to our compost pile. So that's really what it does, is it just sediment settles out there.
That's great. Yeah, the other thing I just want to highlight is the sections of grading there are cut to a certain length where they're actually somewhat manageable. And if those are too long, they really become super heavy. And so those are probably heavy enough as they are, but just a heads up for folks that grading can get really heavy. So planning to have it in sections makes cleaning a lot easier. Right, Andy?
Yeah, I think we use pliers to just kind of go into one of those notches there and lift that out. But yeah, there's some heft to them.
And just the other real quick thing I remember Andy talking about is the width of that drain, and maybe you talked about it too when you did it, Mark. The width of that drain is wide so that you can get a shovel in there for cleaning out. And that's another key.
Shovel. Yep.
Yep.
And there was a question what Andy used to clean it, and Andy wrote just hose everything down, squeegee, bulk water, it's shoveling out of the drain, and then lots of flushing, and then wet backing. So for the picture.
Yeah, and I think maybe even some bleach at the end, Andy. Do you remember you were talking about it? Maybe.
I definitely did not do that. Probably it should be done, but I did not.
Yeah, and that might be what a seasonal deep clean or something could potentially look like that. And what do you do on a week, day to day or week to week? Just shovel it out and leave the water standing.
In the winter time, it's probably every 3 days, 2 or 3 days, where you can lift that grate out of there and kind of see where the sediment level is, and if it's approaching the top of that standpipe, then you're losing sediment down the standpipe or any smaller debris, and we don't want that to happen, because you can in theory clog that pipe, and then you've got a big issue on your hands. So probably every couple of days in the wintertime, we're shoveling that out, because otherwise it gets to be a big.
So the other just real quick thing on cleaning would be to try to keep any spray to a minimum. So use relatively low pressure, high flow water for cleaning this out. The idea being we don't want whatever potential contamination might be in that drain from being up onto the floor, onto the equipment, onto produce. And then the other thing is anything we can do to schedule those cleanings so that it's allowed to almost stay open just like this, so it can dry completely over a period of time. So drying that out is almost as important as if you were to treat it with a sanitizer. So that's just something to keep in mind for folks considering trench drains and how to do cleaning of them.
Yeah, that's probably something we don't do enough of, but at the end of the day, we do clean it. So that's probably a great idea to throw a big fan kind of aimed at that trench there to help dry it out, and then come morning, throw the grates back.
That'd be great.
All right. And listeria being a concern there, specifically there are some bacteria that do really well in those kinds of conditions that are wet and cool. Okay, anything else there or questions before we move on and look at the Dutton's place?
Mark, just real quick, Mark, any kind of, in a nutshell, things you feel you did really well with your floor decision making and design, and things you do differently?
Well, we had a really good concrete contractor, and they did a great job on the floors. So very happy with the quality of the floors. They really kind of came up with a good idea for bench design. and they work well with me on that. We'd used them in the past to build some large greenhouses on our farm before they actually built the wash pack structure as well as the concrete work. So kind of lucked out there in some respects. There's a couple things I wish I would have done differently. I wish I would have raised the barn a little higher because we have drainage issues from outside. Actually, the heavy rainstorm actually flows into the barn, so we have some issues there. And I guess the other thing would have been instead of using parent material underneath that concrete floor, if we wouldn't have been so cheap and excavated more of that out and thrown in sand and done some blue board on top of that, that would have been really, that's what we should have done. So that's hard to do afterwards. You kind of have to do it from the get-go. I'd say don't try to save money if you're doing especially in the Northeast, if you're doing a wash pack facility with a concrete floor. Spend the money to do it right the first time.
Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and knowledge, Mark. Really appreciate it, as always. We do have one question from Paula and Clay. Say the finish on the floor looks like our floor. It's brushed with a shop broom just before hardening. Do you remember that? Was that floor brushed for its final finish?
I must have been out in the field when they did that, but it must be. You can see it's a really fine brush mark to it. Andy's probably been closer to that floor than I have, so he might I remember, but it's not so fine that it's slippery. It's just the right amount. So they may have brushed it at some point. It looks like there's brush marks on it.
Great, thanks.
Thanks so much, Mark. And Mark, sticking around here, so when we get into the discussion, we can you can ask him more questions. So let's we'll hop south down to the Banana Belt in southeastern Vermont. Newfane, well, that's a little higher elevation than where I live, which is really Banana Belt, and Howie as well, my neighbor. Dutton Farm, and Joseph Dutton is one of the kids of the Duttons, Paul Dutton and Wendy started the farm in the mid 80s. And again, we're looking at Route 30. This is a tourist zone, and they really hit on, wow, we got a lot of folks with some money coming up from New York and Connecticut, Massachusetts every weekend, all summer long. And then they really got into these farm stands and farm stores. So this is the one in Newfane that we're looking at here, and that's where that work was done. Their home field is over in Brookline, a little ways away, but they have fields, a number of fields all over the place. And a fairly large farm, 150 acres of veg, and a bunch of berries, 40 acres, and berries, and I should have added fruit, apples there as well. And then these three big farm stands, and all in sort of high touristy places, 37 years in business. And they've done a great job cranking a lot of things out. And they also have a lot of turnover, and it's pretty chaotic and at times. And they have some challenges with facilities and upkeep and not having enough, like anyone, not having enough hours in the day and hands on the work, and employees that stick around.
Want to get the volume through up there or from here?
So anyway, we one of these places, the Newfane store was the first one. It was built in the early mid 80s, I think, when things were getting up and running, and high time for, there've been apples in there, and we did not, I can say, sort of in the foreground under the identify on the bottom right here, and the outside loading dock is almost like completely crumbled from, I think, Bob, what you were talking about, the acids in apples primarily, in this case, not cranberries. But they've had a lot of issues with acid and problems with the floors, especially recently. And so we were over there, and Chris spent a lot of time, and I'll let him take over.
Thanks, Hans. So the Duttons reached out because they had concerns over some of especially the cracks and the pitting in what you see through that large doorway, or those two metal doors, or two apple storage rooms. And so apples are stored there through the winter. for marketing from about this time year to June or beyond the next year. And they also have some mixed veg going in there as well, and other stone fruit. So they reached out with concerns about cracks and pitting in their floor and what they could do to address that. And the main concern there was listeria, and with the cracks having water that tends to stand and stay after either after produce that's been washed has gone into the cooler, or after the floor has been swept and hosed down. So what I did was take a look at what is the best practice for repairing cracks and pits in concrete. And we put together a series of resources that capture that. There's both there's a web page as well as a printed or PDF sheet, but there's also a video series, and the video series walks you through the steps of how to repair these things. And so the first is really find out where the trouble is. And so, looking for the cracks to be repaired or the pits to be repaired. And also, using Mark as an example, think about what's going on underneath the slab that's causing this to happen. Is it just some initial settling that cracked the concrete and has never really been addressed? Or is it something new or is it something that changes seasonally? So what we're going to talk about, what we did with the Duttons was address mainly things that did not have a whole lot of dislocation. They were cracks that could be filled. We weren't really trying to level out, say, cracks more than, say, 2 inches in width or 2 inches of height difference. So the issue with trying to repair things that have that much dislocation is there's something deeper going on. There's something bigger going on structurally. And what we would be doing here would just be patching or band-aiding. And that's not really what we're trying to accomplish. So identify the cracks. We did that. We went through. Next slide, please. So these are some trouble spots. You can see pitting on the right-hand side. You can see some cracks on the left-hand side. And importantly, look at the top of that left-hand photo, and you can see where, this is not a lot of water, but you can see where does it collect? Right in that crack. And if you can see it at the surface of the crack, it's probably fairly deep down as well. So what we're trying to do is try to make this floor whole again, and also make it one of the key challenges they felt from this was just getting it clean. So having a smooth, continuous surface is going to let them hose it down, squeegee where they need to, and ultimately sweep, vacuum, and really clean up. Next slide, please.
And it's tracking. Think about if, this is a sort of a hotbed for vector, and then they're driving over it all the time, in and out, and then crates, into the store. So things are getting tracked all over the place. And so that's more the concern from the risk management.
And the fancy word that we toss around is harborage. So like harboring a criminal, right? You're potentially harboring pathogens, both human pathogens, but also plant pathogens in these nooks and crannies. So either way, whether the motivation is human health, produce safety, or plant pathogen controlling storage disease, for example, there's some motivation here. Okay, so this is all just finding out what we're going to fix. Next slide, please. The next step is to expose it. And what this means is you can see the crack on the far left there has been oxidized over time. It's got dirt in there, who knows what else. And so if you were to just lay some repair mortar on that, it's not going to stick. It may stick for a little while, but you run a pallet jack over it a couple days in a row and it's going to start chipping. So kind of like, I hate this analogy, but it's kind of like when you go and get a cavity filled. They got to take some out first, and they got to, what we're looking to do is end up with a really good bond between the repair mortar and the concrete substrate that is underneath. So to expose it, you can see Joseph in that picture to the right using a masonry chisel and a hammer to just carve out something about thumb width at an angle on that crack. And so what we're doing is just exposing some fresh concrete Howard, this is going to be the challenge with a skim coat on your floor as well. If you can imagine, it's really tough to get a good bond on concrete that's been there a long time. So there may be a way to rough it up with an abrader or something. Sometimes you see them using that on a highway where they sort of scuff up the roadway before patching it. But anyway, we're looking to expose a fresh surface of concrete, and you can see the color difference. We did experiment with using an angle grinder, a die grinder as well for doing this. It works pretty well. It works especially well for pits. So where there's pitting, a die grinder is a really nice way of getting some of that surface exposed. And then the next step is to clean. And this involves the use of, I went ahead and got a special cleaner. It is something you either have to order online. I did not find it at any of the usual suspect big box stores or local hardware stores. So I ended up ordering it online. It comes as a concentrate, and you can see the mixed version of it was to the right in that mayonnaise jar. But you wet the crack a little bit, put some of this cleaner on it, and then go to town on it with that wire brush. Again, good thing to use either a drill with a wire brush attachment or an angle grinder to make this easier on yourself. And what you're looking for, Hans, the previous picture just for a second, what you're looking for is sort of that white sudsy result. If the crack is super dirty, that's just going to become sort of brown and oily. And so you're going to have to do a couple of rounds of cleaning to get the grime out of there, and then make sure you're cleaning that concrete surface. All right, next slide, please.
And that wet back there is a pretty essential tool. Oops.
Yeah, and this is, I'm giving you a flyby here, but the videos get into each of these steps in greater detail, and the guide sheet covers them as well. All right, next slide. So I think that cleaner was something like $9, and it makes 7 quarts, and I'm still working my way through it. So it's not a bad thing to invest in. Okay, and then for the repair, this is where I spent a fair bit of time experimenting with different tools for actually applying the repair, either quick setting cement or repair mortar. Either one worked just fine. And what I found worked best was applying it with something called a margin trowel, which is just a small 2-inch trowel, and then come back and smooth it with, of all things, a rubber grout trowel. So these are more commonly used for doing tile work. But what's nice about it is you can see in that sort of long vertical picture with the word repair on it right in the center of the view, it leaves you with a pretty darn smooth finish. And everything else I tried just gave me a bunch of like sawtooth finish, and it just drove me nuts. I was looking for something that we could actually be happy, sweeping up on or squeegeeing over. So, and Hans, you were part of this too. Is there any details you'd like to add?
The only thing I'll add is that the actually cleaning out, exposing the cracks. It's hard work, but it's also if you like work that's satisfying, or you like picking scabs or things like that, like it's great work. It's just very satisfying, and to do a good job with it. So I wouldn't be fearful of the work if you have the time or get the right employee to work at it.
All sorts of great body analogies tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just highlight a couple of resources here. The first 3 I've already dropped into the chat box. Again, Andy and I and Hans work really hard to try to make sure that resources are available in a variety of formats. So print, web, and video. And so these are no exception. The cleaning tools, I wanted to really highlight these because we're mainly talking about floors and therefore talking about drains and water. Andy has done an amazing job pulling together a summary of some really nice cleaning tools, and some of them in particular are going to be super helpful for floors. So Andy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but any in particular you want to highlight just off the cuff.
Any cleaning tools?
Yeah. So I was thinking squeegees, for example.
Yeah.
You got,
Squeegees. If it's all summed up in the cleaning tools blog post linked there, so that's where you can see everything. But we basically say that it is worth spending the money on a high quality cleaning tool. It's really not a whole lot more expensive to go with a Vican or Remco branded product, which come out of the food and beverage like manufacturing industry. So where food safety is, we'll say a notch higher than the farm level. So they're made with hygienic design. They're built to hold up and last long. So be sure to check those out, especially their squeegees. They have some floor brooms as well. They have some that's called like a deck scrub, which would be perfect for those heavy duty things. It's a smaller, stiffer floor brush or broom essentially, so you can really scrub rather than just rinse down. So those would be something to consider as well.
thanks, Andy. Hans, I think that's the end of our prepared material.
Okay, and so that, and this is all somewhat general, but getting into some real specifics on these particular types of repairs. And Howie, you're the next, you're getting a good repair on for your situation is something we definitely want to dig into. So, how to actually rough that up and treat it, and then probably pour in epoxy.
It sounds like a pretty terrible process, truthfully. I mean, this is not a DIY operation, renting some heavy duty highway, scraper, to make a mess out of the concrete. I mean, I wouldn't want to be operating one of those diamond cutter machines going up.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of paint or something to give it a seal, and like an epoxy paint.
Yeah.
That,
Yep.
Could be applied.
There definitely are epoxy coatings that will fill and self-level. And that may well be your best option if it's a large area. They do get fairly expensive, but considering what the alternative is
compared to what,
Yeah, right. Considering,
there's nothing cheap, as Mark. There's nothing cheap about doing a pack.
Yeah.
There's no cheap.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
One, you can rent floor. It's called Floor Profiler. It's just a little walk behind grinder from most rental houses, and you can do 1,000 square feet in a day. You have to usually buy the knives, because if you hit aggregate, it trashes them. It goes pretty quick. The other thing is, be wary of epoxy if you don't have a vapor barrier under your concrete, because it'll lift. Because a really cool coating, but it's wicked expensive, is cementitious polyurethane, because it breathes. But it's only professionally installed because it has like a 5-minute pot time, working time. So it's not something, and it's really expensive. It's not something you want to learn on the job. So that's just my experience on some floors.
That's great, Bob. Thank you. So is that floor profiler?
I love performance coatings, epoxy, cementitious polyurethane, but I'm kind of going towards just sealing them every year. It's a balancing act.
Sealing, you mean the floor that you would like to repair?
Just keeping them up, doing upkeep with just a conventional concrete sealer, spray on concrete sealer. There's a couple that have actually anti-slip coatings in them that I like. Like, I consider floors tools.
Right.
Great point.
There are outfits, and I did call a commercial outfit that came and gave me a quote for doing a coating with the poly, whatever.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not cheap, and it's nothing I would even attempt to do. But it was a little, at the time, they gave me the quote. It was a lot of money, and I thought I could live with what I had for the moment, but it's something to consider. I don't
Yeah.
mind hiring contractors to do the nasty work. If they're reliable, it's worth it than trying to learn on the go doing it yourself. So, yeah, no, thanks. That's good information, Bob.
And how we'd be in a position to do some test places as well, certainly with some of this stuff to see if you like the product or the finish even in your barn. And another option would be to hire a contractor with the right tool to even not necessarily rough up the entire floor, but maybe the main roadways that you use. Because
I agree. It doesn't have to be the entire. My barn is 45 by 90 down there. It's a big space to do. I don't need it all done. We could focus it on where we're actually washing and stuff like that. Okay, great.
Yeah, so we could follow up, but this is a good starting point to at least
great.
move on it.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. I got to leave right now, but
Howard, thank
great.
you. Thanks
Yeah.
for raising the questions, and Bob, thanks for your input and sharing your expertise.
And I'll follow up with you, Howie, too.
Okay.
After.
Always
Great.
good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
See you, Howard.
Everybody. Thanks.
Yeah, Howard.
Yep, take care.
So, this is great. And what I love, we have about 15 minutes left, perhaps, and it'd be great to turn on your video. And I think, as you saw there, what we've got going on here is basically like, having seen this and thinking, what are you thinking of doing? What's the issues that you're worried about or concerned about? What could this group help you resolve or think through? And just bring it up. We'll just have a pretty informal discussion. And I could share. I'll share the screen in a minute, but basically after the workshop, put together a little plan of what you'd like to do, whatever resource needs you have that are specific, and we can reach out and chat one-on-one. That's fine. We're hopefully going to do that and follow up in a few months to see where you are. If you've made any improvements, some of the concrete stuff might be just a planning, making a plan and reaching out to contractors. That might be a good first step, that kind of thing. So that's what we're heading towards. And let's use this time right now just to hear what people are thinking specifically about particular projects.
Okay, just a quick question. At least in northwestern Vermont, there are no concrete contractors till 2025, maybe. SD Ireland has bought up all the independents. No one does flat work anymore. So we do it ourselves now. We have some skill. We have people that work concrete. When you're talking finish, what's the standard? Above brush finish. I want to burn the finish. I want it smooth, so it's squeegeeable. Is that a word?
Mm-hmm. I think it is.
And
Sure.
also pitch. I think 1/8 inch a foot is what a lot of people throw out, but I kind of feel like I'm on a ship that needs the port bilge pump.
Yeah. We actually lean on 1/4 inch per foot. It's 2% for these types of applications.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. So it depends a little bit on the volume of water that you're using in the process, but for most vegetable washing, certainly for roots, if that water's hitting the floor and you want it to make it to a central drain or even a spot drain, that's what has worked well.
Okay.
in terms of the finish, brush finish is by and large the industry standard for vegetable wash packs that in our area that we're most familiar with. There are some places where a little bit more polishing is done, but certainly not high polish. It just gets too slick. And, this is where, to your point, it's important to be working with a concrete contractor who you can really partner with. And and when it gets done is also really critical, not just it being done, but, at the right point of cure.
Right.
So that's kind of where we've landed so far. Andy, you want to add anything to that? It's been a while since we've actually talked about that finish. Or anybody else have anything to add on that?
It has been a while, and not that you'd necessarily use them on your pack shed floor, but there are other ways to finish concrete. Some can do like stamping, which can look really nice and really decorative, or stenciled concrete. I just did a quick Google search and I found one called a salt finish, which they commonly use around like swimming pools. So you'd recognize that in a public space like that, or maybe a water park, versus the broom finish that we talked about, commonly used on sidewalks. Trowel finish is typically what you'd use in your basement or garage. So those are a couple other ideas that could be considered depending on where you're needing it done. I built my house a few years ago, and I found a guy locally who did the foundation work, but then there was another concrete finishing company to come in and actually do the trowel work. So that was kind of neat.
Yeah, or I wonder, could you, find some lone individual that is, has had a fair bit of experience with that kind of thing, but doesn't have a company, could come in as a pinch hitter, right at the right moment. Hey, go ahead.
What's the timeline, kind of start to finish, if you're clearing out a crack and adding the cleaner to it, and so you got to let that dry out, and then adding the concrete filler to that and let that dry. What's typically a timeline for that process? Maybe a crack that's about 10 feet long or so.
Yeah, great question. So I think I was able to do about, in terms of chiseling, I think was able to do 10 feet in about 10 minutes. So about a foot a minute, clearing it out.
Well, you're hired.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was on video, so I had to do it quick. And cleaning is pretty quick. That does not take that long, unless you got to do it multiple times. The quick set concrete and quick set cement and repair mortar, they're made to actually cure pretty quickly. And it depends. One thing we found working with Joseph was the floor inside was actually fairly cool. And the space is fairly humid, and that actually really prolonged the curing. So it'll probably have a much stronger repair, because generally speaking, the longer you give it to cure in higher humidity, the stronger it is. But it does affect how quickly it can cure. And so he was able to run a pallet jack on it, I think within 10 hours, which was actually pretty good. We were thinking it might actually be longer. But it took longer the closer he got to the cooler. The cracks that were closest to the cooler took longer to cure.
Got it.
But it was within a day project, right? A few hours, and what there was, 50 feet of crack that was repaired or something? I don't know.
I'm guessing we were closer to 150.
Yeah, actually,
wow.
There was a lot.
And pits too. The pits are.
It's a fairly quick process.
Not bad.
Yeah.
But the one key point there is you don't want to be doing this when there's produce around.
Right.
So planning for that ahead, and this is at a farm market, so there, people were jumping over over the crack repair project to grab, bushel baskets of peaches and stuff like that. So it's, it's a little bit of planning and communication goes a long way.
Yeah, with Dutton especially, there's not very much time where they're not running through there all over.
They're cranking.
Yeah.
Did you consider doing any like a concrete saw to do to make like a V-notch as opposed to hand chisel, just to speed that process up, or is it just there's too much stuff flying in that process as opposed to just hand chisel?
I didn't go that route. Partly I was trying to think of what could be done even for just small places. The other thing is a lot of these cracks are really very windy roads, and even just using the angle grinder, even the width of that disc, that grinding wheel, it's enough where you actually end up making more notches than you really need to. And so we did mess around with some power tools. I kind of just landed on, you really get into a rhythm with the chisel and the hammer, and it flies. It goes pretty quick. That said, man, that's a great idea. Get a concrete saw with.
Yeah, maybe you thought of an air hammer with a brick point.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, did look into that. It's I think it's all a matter of what you're comfortable with. And you really can get into a rhythm with.
And the size of the cracks and whatnot. I mean, I think it's probably even more efficient to do it by hand with those littler cracks and less material.
And you can definitely get a masonry chisel with a wider tip too, and that can make it go even faster. So.
Hey, listen, I'm looking at the time and I see we have there's Larry and James Donegan just came in. Came in a lot earlier, right? But we didn't get an intro from you, James. Is that you, James? I don't know if you're on. Yep.
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. And we got Clay, but yeah, James, if since you haven't even said anything yet, if you're able to turn on your video and possibly talk a little bit about why you showed up and what you got going on, perhaps for a repair or some project. You always got some good stuff going on and good sunglasses at this point. So, and Clay and Larry too. It'd be great to hear from you. But James, what's on your mind?
Well, our watershed is just a wood deck right now, and I'm looking to make it more of a year-round area.
What do you have in mind?
I'm just getting started. I think a concrete floor would be an appropriate floor there.
And that's that deck outside of your place there with the shed roof. It's sort of open on three sides, and you want to close that in, make it more all season.
Yep.
So thoughts from who's on the call about you have a deck that's sitting off the ground, what, a foot or something on concrete pads or something, or?
Yeah, no, it's just some pressure treated. Sitting on the ground, pretty much sitting on the ground. Wood deck sitting on the ground.
Yeah, but you'd want to keep the floor probably the same size, same height, I would assume, right? You're not necessarily moving it up or down.
Right.
Yeah. So thoughts on that? If you wanted to go towards a concrete floor from something that's sitting off the ground, Phil, what would you suggest?
I would say be careful what you wish for. If you make it a year-round facility, you're never going to get off the farm.
And how are you going to ski?
Yeah. Is it so? Is it concrete that's going to go inside an existing structure or on the outside of like an apron or something? Is that what you're talking about, James? Or?
Yeah. So right now the wash shed is just a shed roof off the barn. The concrete would be, outside a structure with a foundation.
It already has a concrete foundation underneath it.
No, it doesn't.
It
would be up against the old barn foundation.
Got it.
But the shed itself has no foundation, just posts that are dug into the ground.
And do you want to drive up to it like a loading dock or just on the ground? Level with the ground?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a loading dock.
Do you have a lot of stuff with like casters or wheels that you're moving around from place to place on this deck?
We haven't. I mean, probably don't need it, but we haven't. You know, because it's a deck with gaps between the boards, we haven't had that option really.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because, not to poo-poo the idea of pouring a nice slab of concrete, but we were talking to the previous Twilight Highlight was talking about low-cost methods, and one of the low-cost methods we heard from, not necessarily from the folks that were on last week, but from folks as we've been talking, some folks have looked at creating basically a sandwich of pea gravel in between two pieces of geotextile fabric. And they use that basically as their floor. And then they put their wash pack stuff on top of that. If you have like a 3 or 4 inch base of pea gravel, that allows for the drainage, and the geotextile fabric helps carry it away. And that might be cheaper than getting a slab of concrete laid and give you the same drainage.
Yeah. So the water would just flow through the floor, really? Huh. Just slope it in the direction you want it to go.
Correct. And you know, you can build in, if you really want to do something interesting, you could put in some kind of vapor barrier and have some field tiles, or like small field tiles like in the ground below it that could carry the water away in a direction that you want it, even if the slope doesn't work well for you.
What are you washing there, James?
A lot of salad greens, and then a little of everything else. I mean, I don't have a barrel washer. We're one acre, 1.5 acre. We specialize in greens and not roots.
The best way to have a floor that drains is prevent water from getting on it. And so I would say if you're working in sinks, hook up some drains to those sinks and get the water out off of the deck somewhere. So I guess another question is, what don't you like about the deck?
Right.
Yeah, I guess mostly thinking about heating the space.
Okay.
So,
yep. Good call.
Get a lot of rodents and put them under the floor.
Yeah.
Radiant heat.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're mainly focused on greens, we kind of have seen this tendency, everybody like jumping in on big trench drains and spot drains, and if you don't have that much water hitting the floor, if you can find a way of directly draining that water that you are using out of the space before it hits the floor, you're golden.
Yep. Okay.
And do you have space under the deck, like that you could actually install insulation under the deck, like a layer of polyiso or something like that?
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
And you still have drainage. I mean, the drainage will be an issue there, obviously. It's worth thinking about. Well, could you keep that current setup, or could you? I don't know if anyone ever worked with whatever skim coats that would really seal a deck. Don't know.
I think if you're looking to heat this space, you're probably going to want to do something other than what you have there for the deck to ensure you can seal it well and insulate it well. But I missed that in your introduction. I think the alternative that Phil raised could work there, even in a loosely enclosed space with a space heater or whatever. And I think thinking about the wastewater you have, the discharge that you have, really can help inform just how much to dump into, how much effort and cost to put into the floor.
The person who did that actually did that inside of a hoop house. They took one side of a hoop house and did that layering process inside the hoop house. So it was heated that way.
Well, thanks for the ideas, guys.
Old, and don't let us stop you from upgrading. You want to move inside with a concrete floor, by all means.
And Andy will come over and clean your drain.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally worth doing.
I get the other. So if you do go that path, the other question I would have is there benefit in pouring that slab level with the slab that exists inside the other building?
There's no slab that exists inside the other building.
Gotcha. Never mind.
There's a stone foundation.
It's a bit of, but to get to the cooler, the walk-in isn't, you have to go through a few doors and maybe up and down some steps or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the wash shed that's, really outside the older barn, and then up a few steps is where we pack. So we send stuff in on a ramp, a rolling ramp, and it gets packed inside, washed outside.
But predominantly, you're in the milder months doing that, or you're doing more winter stuff?
There was only a couple weeks last year that we didn't wash. So we put plastic around the shed and chose the best days of the week. And
sounds like it's time for a little bit of an upgrade. Well, James, and I'm happy to follow up and pull in the team as needed, but it seems like it'd be great to do a little one-on-one, a little bit more looking at some of the options, if that would be helpful for you, and before making a plan for what you're going to do.
Great.
All right. Awesome. We can follow up. And we are almost out of time. I was looking at Clay and Larry, if you guys want to, if there's anything you want to add or ask some questions, even if we don't have time to answer them right now, at least it's just a point that we can follow up on after the call.
Yeah, I enjoyed seeing the pictures of Mark's floor drain. It's quite a bit larger than our floor drain, which I think is a 4-inch floor drain. So we're cleaning it, 2 or 3 times a day, sometimes when we're washing it out. But it's a much smaller station as well. So I liked the aspects of the drain where it has the elevated drain spout to collect that all the bits and pieces that get washed down. So that was nice to see. There was so with trying to design and build a new wash station, one of the things that we wanted to have was everything on a single level slab. Because right now we have to move from the level of concrete up a step and around the corner to go into a walk-in. So question that I had was, if our new barn has a main area with a floor drain, would it be suggested to have drains in the walk-in coolers as well? Or would you want that water to be squeegeed and moved out the door into a more central floor drain? Trying to keep things simple for someone to build it. Fewer drains is always easier. But for a food safety standpoint, is it better to have a floor drain inside the walk-in, or does it really come down to just cleaning? But really appreciated the information tonight.
I'll give you my take on that. I think having a drain in the cooler makes sense because you want to be able to actually clean the cooler effectively, and also just for even use of the cooler during the storage periods when you're not cleaning it, having a place for condensation to go. And the key would be maintaining that drain and cleaning it. So it's every drain you put in can become a liability. So for every drain you have, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to it and cleaning it, and preventing it from becoming a source of a problem for contamination. The idea of not having a drain in a cooler and hosing the cooler down, cleaning it, and then squeegeing out into your wash pack area is, in my opinion, introducing a new route of contamination potentially into your wash pack area. So keeping it contained in the cooler and going down its own drain, and having the wash pack in its own area going down its drain, it would be preferable in my opinion. But I would love to hear what other folks think about that.
I guess a lot of it depends on what you're storing in your walk-in coolers. I mean, we only have that drain in our wash pack area. We have 3 other separate cooler rooms that don't have any drainage, and the majority of what we do and store in there are roots. And so oftentimes we're actually wetting the floor down. We want it to be cold and moist environment for those roots to last us through the winter. I mean, that being said, when we're not using them so much in the summertime, we clean them out, but then they stay pretty dry because we're not washing or packing in those coolers. It's all in the wash house facility.
Thanks, Mark. Phil, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate what you said, Chris, I think, keeping it, having a drain inside of the cooler makes a lot of sense, because if it's not easy to wash out, you're not going to wash it out, and not having a drain in there makes it a pain in the neck to wash out. So you want to make doing the stuff that you have, or the stuff that you'd rather not do that is good for food safety, you want to make sure it's as easy as possible, so that you're more inclined to do it than you would otherwise be.
I will also add that it depends a little bit on the cooler itself too. So if you have a small cooler that you have to step inside of, and it's like down in a well, you best better have a spot drain in it, because it's really hard to clean. If it's a big, like in Jericho Settlers, you're at the same grade, right? Big doors.
Yep.
It's pretty easy to sweep things out and to mop things out. And so I think that's a consideration. And we are just 3 minutes past time now. So, and I know, Larry, I kept been picking on you, but if there's any last minute thing you want to say, if not, that's fine. We are going to need to end this in just a minute here, because I don't want folks to go over.
Well, this is Meg.
Hi, Meg.
Speaking for Larry.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to watch the recording. We came in late because, yes, I forgot about the Eastern time zone versus Central.
Yeah, I should have been more clear about that, huh?
No, the minute we logged on, it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, yeah, watch the beginning of it. It should be up in a couple days. And
okay.
yeah, and think about what you're wanting to do, and then reach out to me via email or phone, and we can set up a little follow-up or one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. There's so much to learn, and this was was wonderful. So I'll be looking forward to watching from the beginning.
Okay, great.
Thanks everybody for your time. Much appreciated. Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining. Okay, so at that we'll call it quits.